Hello class, and welcome to the video for Chapter 7 in your textbook, Foundations of Web Design, CSS Styling Text. And we're going to be looking at that today in our video. So I'm going to try to read through this quickly to keep the video as short as possible, but hopefully that you'll get a clearer understanding, of course, and then also working through the steps together. So now I tried to make the font a little bit bigger to make it more visible to you, also increase the quality a little bit as well. So in this chapter, you'll begin your journey of delving deeper into using CSS to style the look and feel of your website. So again, CSS is all about design. So with some simple CSS rules, you can start to change the fonts you use and the look and color of your text. There are lots of things you can do with fonts in CSS, and I'm only going to cover a handful of basic but essential font and text rules you can use to transform text from the basic black and white serif text the browsers start with to something more uniquely your own. So font properties. If you want to change the style, font family, size, style, weight, etc. of a font, the following properties are some of the most common you'll use on any project. For the font property examples, open up 01font.html document in your browser and 01font.css in your text editor. So I did that right here, so you can see font.html actually in my browser. So I want this right here, the preview still open, and then what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to click over in here and open up the CSS file. So you can see I have my chapter folder. You should have already downloaded that. Go to my CSS folder and choose 01 font. And then right there, so this is how I want to see it. I have my font file here, and I can have my preview here. Either one you can do. I'm going to zoom in over here so we can see this better on the video, and I'm going to make my preview a little bit smaller so that way try to make it visible for you as you're watching. So we have those open. Now font family property allows you to modify the actual font family the user sees. By default, many browsers use a serif font like Times or Times New Roman, and we can see that over here in our preview. So Times New Roman is what we're looking at right now, or Times. So let's talk about the font family generic names and some of the safe fonts found on most computers. Now sans serif fonts have a smooth look to them. They don't have the little end strokes you see on serif fonts, and some of the font family values that you'll find associated with this family are Arial, Helvetica, Impact, Trebuchet, MS, and then also Verdana, and we're going to look at some of those. So in 01 font CSS document, which we're looking at right now, add the following rule to the CSS for the ID, which we use the pound symbol for that, with the value of sans font to apply the generic sans serif value for the font family property, and shows an example of that. So we're going to go down here to sans font, click under that, put pound sans font, curly bracket, and then choose font, or excuse me, type in font family, and space sans serif, semicolon, and then save it. And then when I save it, hopefully you can see this. I'll zoom in a little bit more. I can go and refresh my web page here, and you can see it changes the font to sans serif, so, or at least the font family of sans serif right here. Now the browser, what it does is when you put this in, the browser is going to search for sans serif font on your computer. Depending on your operating system, it could get anything from Arial, which is typically what happens with Windows, and that's what this probably is right here, to Helvetica, which is what typically appears on a Mac. And you can see what it looks like on the book chapter here. Now the default the default serif font is replaced by a default sans serif font. And then they talk about Windows versus Mac. Now I'm going to move down to step 7.1.2 in your textbook. When you add more fonts to your value, separate the font names with commas, adding in specific font choices before the font generic name. And so we can see here, it says in the step we have sans font, and then font family, and right before font sans serif, I'm going to click and type in Verdana, which is the one I want to select instead of Arial, comma, press space, I'll save it, and then refresh it. And you can see it changes it to the Verdana font instead. So you have a lot of control there, but you have to put a comma in between. If you wish to add a font with multiple words in its name, you need to surround it with the quotation marks, single font name, you can see that in single quotations, or double quotation marks, which I'm going to do that right here. I'll click in front of Verdana again, put in quotation marks, Trebuchet, MS, quotation marks, comma. I'll press space, save, and then refresh. And you can see it changes it again. So there's a lot of different things you can do. Makes it a little bit more unique. Now your font family now uses one of the named fonts. So from here we've given two different names and it uses one of those. Talks about font stacking. A font stack is a list of fonts declared in your CSS font family property. It allows you to control the look of fonts on your website. Fonts are listed in order of your preference. If the first font is not found in the user system, the browser will go to your next option, and so on until it finds a font on the list or reaches the generic name. Now a serif font has little curves on the ends of the glyphs. Serif is also the default value for the font family property for most, if not all, web browsers. The font family most often used is Times or Times New Roman. Other serif values include, but are not limited to, Georgia and Palatino or Palatino linotype. So we're at step 7.1.3 now. Now add another CSS rule, selecting the ID selector, which is the number sign or pound, with the value of serif font. Give the font family property the value of Georgia, close, and close with serif. So I'm going to type in pound serif font, curly bracket, enter, and I'm going to type in font family Georgia serif semicolon. And I can save it and refresh the browser, and you can see it changing. Now notice I typed it under serif font. I moved from sans font to serif. So make sure you do that. If it doesn't display properly, double check that. But I can see the change over here in my font. Now it says you see the slight change, but it's a font that renders very well in the browser and is often a popular choice, which is true. You typically see this one as well. Now a monospace font, that's where we're moving to next. So you can see I'm moving down here to mono font in preparation for the next step. A monospace value gives you a fixed width font that looks similar to the text area that you're typing the code in. So it's going to look similar to this. HTML elements such as pre, block element, and code inline element give you a monospace font by default. Some system safe values for the font family include Andale Mono, Courier, Courier New, and Monaco. So generic name needed. It's always good to close with the default font family value for the type of font you've chosen. If the font you've named is not on your user's computer, the generic value will find some font matching its criteria. So you always have with each computer a certain number of fonts installed on that computer, and you can always go online and add more fonts to it. But this is basically saying if they don't have the font you have selected installed on their computer, it's going to find one similar to it instead of just going with the default. Now fixed width and variable width fonts. Fixed width fonts have letters and characters that occupy the same amount of horizontal space. Variable width fonts have letters at different size from one another. Step 7.1.4. Adding a new rule to select mono font that will apply Courier New to the font family property, and don't forget the generic name too. So I'm going to type it in, # mono font, curly bracket, enter, font family, colon, quotation marks, Courier New. Oh, I missed my U there. And then comma, monospace, and semicolon. I'll save it, refresh my browser preview over here, and then I can see it looks different. So it looks more of what's already in here in our browser, or excuse me, our HTML editor. It's a little bit similar there. Now step 7.1.5, the next two values, cursive and fantasy font, which you see right here, these two. I'll click down here in preparation for the step. Have very few fonts that are common among all computer operating systems, and we're actually going to see that here in a second. As a general rule, I strongly recommend staying away from using cursive or fantasy as a generic font, as you just don't know what the user will see. And you're going to see why here on this computer. So here are the basic examples of what types of fonts you'd see using the generic family. So let's type it in. Pound cursive font. Oh, if I could spell cursive. Curly bracket, enter, font, family, cursive, semicolon, and save. And I'll go over here and press refresh. And you can see it picks something closer to it. I think this is actually more of Comic Sans, but it's still not actually cursive. So it doesn't pick it. And then here it continues with the step. We type in fantasy font. I'm going to click right here and just type in hashtag fantasy font, curly bracket, enter, font, family, fantasy, semicolon, save it, and refresh it too. And you'll notice it doesn't actually pick something that looks like the textbook. The textbook version on the Mac OS looks completely different from what is here. So typically on Mac operating system, you'll often see the font Papyrus, where it's a certain font. I always imagine when someone says, think of a fantasy style font. So that's what he thinks of. But you can see on mine, it doesn't at all look fantasy. It looks pretty much the same as some of these other ones. So now here's the general rules to follow when you style the family property value. This is what the general rules are we should take away. You should always include the generic font family at the end of your list of font names. And then a font family that has more than one word in its name and has spaces needs to be within quotes, which we did with Trebuchet or Times New Roman. And then the font family name you use must be on the user's computer, otherwise the generic font family will be used. However, on the website, you'll find ways to use additional fonts that are not on the user's computer, and we'll learn about that later. Now, font size, which is what we're talking about next, the font size property allows you to increase and decrease the size of a font using a variety of measurements for the values. When it comes to selecting what type of font size value you want to use, you won't lack options because it gives you a bunch of them. Common units include pixels, percents, or M, and then keywords such as double extra small, small, medium, large, double extra large, and relative keywords such as smaller and large we can use. Now in the following examples, we're going to stick with pretty common ones. Now we'll keep it basic and use pixels for the unit of measurement to begin with. In CSS, the pixel unit is written as px. It gives you the most control, and it's the easiest one to wrap your head around because often we'll talk about, oh, my screen is capable of so many pixels. Now as a baseline size, most browsers set font size to 16 pixels or a keyword value of normal. The default base font size for paragraphs, lists, and box codes is 16 pixels in height, and you can see that in the picture. So the size of the majority of HTML elements is set to a 16 pixel value. However, the H1 through H6 elements font size is not set to a specific pixel size, but to an M value. And we'll look at that in just a moment. Now the H1 usually calculates at 32 pixels, H2 is 24 pixels, and while you can choose any size you wish, it's best to start when you're starting out to keep it simple and not to vary too much from the defaults, which is very true. So back in 01font.css, which I'm still looking at here, we're going to mess around with the size. So I need to scroll on further, and you can see font size right here. I'll scroll down a little bit, and we'll click right here so we can type it in. It says to type in H1 element to a font size. So I'm going to put the curly brackets, enter, font size, colon, 72 pixels, semicolon, and save it. And this is actually pretty large. I'm going to refresh as I whistle. Refresh the title and you can, or the page, and you can see it's made the title H1, the header, a lot bigger. Now step 7.2.2. We're going to convert the pixel to a percentage. To convert 72 pixels to a percentage, you need to use the following formula. Target divided by context equals the result. So take 72, the target font size value in pixels, that's it. So this is the target, and divide it by 16, which is the contextual browser baseline. And the result is 4.5. So 72 is the size of our pixels, 16 is the baseline, so that's a context, 4.5. So to get a percentage, we have to move the decimal place to the right, 2 places to the right to get 450. So they type in 450% and save. Now when you reload the page, you'll notice nothing happens, no difference. And now there's a benefit to using a percentage instead of pixels, and we'll talk about later in chapter 10. Now the M value, pronounced like saying the letter M, is a bit different from either the pixel or percentage, as its base value, 1M, is based upon the parent element's font size. So in this case, it's the body element, which is set to 16 pixel in CSS. So we're still at 16. So step 7, 2, 3. Again, take the H1 element you selected and use the formula target divided by context equals the result. So same thing. You can plug in the numbers. The target size we said is 72. You divide that by the context value of 16 pixels, giving you the result of 4.5. We already said this. Just leave the number as your result and add EM. So what I'm going to do is add a decimal. Let me move my mouse out of the way and type in EM. Save it, refresh it, exact same thing. So 4.5 EM font size, same thing there. Now again, it looks like there's no change in the way the font size looks. While this might seem a bit complex, don't worry, but try to keep changing the different sizes. And if you have time to play around with it, you could. So change it to things that are less than 1, like a quarter, 0.25 EM, but no negative values, and see what you get. Now we're going to move along here to font style. Now font style, I'm going to scroll down in my CSS file and click here. Font style property has 3 options for value. There's normal, italic, and oblique. So it allows you to italicize fonts or italicize a previously italicized font. So you can do the opposite. Be careful, as not all fonts have an italicized font face. In that case, CSS simply slants the font and makes it oblique. So step 7.3.1. Style the H2 element with the italic value. So I type in H2, since I'm dealing with font style, curly bracket, enter. And then I'm going to type in font style italic semicolon and save it. And when I do that, I press refresh on the page, and notice I go down here to header 2, and it's changed what is typography to italics. Now font variant. Font variant property simply allows you to style text using the value of small caps. So I'm going to scroll down here for font variant, which I'm going to use here in a second. So small cap. So set the H2 element. So type that in there, H2, and apply the font variant property with the value of small caps. Now you notice in the textbook it has a typo. It says font style. You want to type in font variant colon small caps semicolon, save, and then I'm going to refresh. And you notice it changed it right here, or it should do it. But you'll notice when I refreshed it, it didn't change. And I wanted to bring something up when I did this. I typed in font variant, which is true, but you'll notice I still have an error with it. Sometimes it'll show a color over here to suggest it, but up here it says there's something wrong with the syntax. And it'll actually give me the line. Now 73, it says there's something wrong with it right here. So expected identifier for pseudo class or pseudo element, but found this. So it says it's bad. Well, the reason it's bad is because I never put the curly bracket in. So don't be afraid if it doesn't work. Look and see up here what line it tells you and fix it. So because I'm adding the curly bracket now, I can push enter, and then over here I'm going to type in the closing one, save it, and then refresh, and now it works. So anytime your page doesn't work, always check and see up here, is there an error? Right now I don't have any errors, thankfully. But if I click on it, it'll check it as you type, but you can always click check syntax now too. So when you got a typo, an error, don't go, oh, I don't know what it is. Look for it, and if you can't find it, check up here, and it should help you. All right, moving on to font weight. So I'm going to scroll down, click here, be prepared for my next step. The font weight property has a number of values you can choose from, but they do nearly the same thing. So you can make your font bold, bolder, normal, or lighter in weight. So step 733. You can bold the text that isn't bold by default. So I'm going to type in DT, curly bracket, enter, and type in font weight bold semicolon. I'm going to save it, and when I refresh the page, you'll notice it changes all of my headers in the list to bold. Now, and you can also lighten text that is bold by default. So I'm going to type there under it, I'm going to push enter and type in H2, curly bracket, enter, font, oh, it didn't register the enter button, font, weight, lighter, semicolon, and save. And when I do that, you can see it changed some of them to make it lighter, or excuse me, it changed header 2 to make it lighter text. So it makes it look nice. And you can also see it change the weight to these as well. Now, font property shorthand. The font property is a shorthand, and I'll scroll down here to the last part. We're almost done with this file, yay. The font property is a shorthand property that allows you to write all the previous property values into one space separated value in this order. And you can see here it's in the document, but it's also in your book. So step 734. Say you wanted to select the paragraph element that immediately follows H2, which is right down here. So H2, paragraph element. And you want to modify a few values on it. Well, I could type down here H2 plus sign, paragraph element, curly bracket, enter, font, colon, italic, 1.25M / 1.4 Georgia, comma, serif, oh, space before serif, and then semicolon. I save it, press refresh, and you notice it changed it with that tag instead. So, and I applied multiple things to it. So it's a pretty cool thing you can do there with the font property shorthand. It's making it easier for you. Now, text properties, we're moving on to the next header here. The text properties, text align, text decorate, text indent, and text transform normally deal with styling a whole block of text and not the font face style itself. Now, the text align property is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, using Microsoft Word, a lot of other applications, so you're kind of already there. So there's allowing the following values for alignment. There's center, justify, left and right. Now, line height, when it's talking about that, the value /14 right here is for the line height property, so how tall the line is, and will be demonstrated later. But in the font property, the font size and the font height values are always written together and separated by the slash symbol. In the font shorthand property, you can write the value for the font size without the line height, but you cannot write the value for the line height without the value of font size. So step 741, it says here we need to open up 02text.css. And I'm going to do that. I'll get rid of this file right here. I'm going to click on open, go to my CSS folder, text, select that. This will come up. And it says here in the text editor, write a new rule that selects the ID, so #, with a value of text align, and with the value text align that has the DT, and set the text align property to right. So I'm going to zoom in here so you can see this. And right here I'm going to add my example below. So it says I need to put it here. I'm going to type in pound, not $, pound, text align, space DT, space, curly bracket, enter, text, align, right, semicolon. And then I can go and choose to refresh and see the item. Now, of course, I'm gonna have to change here because I'm looking at font. Now, instead of going and open up a new browser preview, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go over here, get rid of this right here, 01 font, change it to 02-text.html, push enter, and it should bring it up. Now, what it's talking about here for the text align, I'm dealing with this item right over here. So you can see it moved text align DT over here to align right. So you can see text align and property over here. Now, one other value the text align property permits is to justify. And so what we're going to do is we're going to set the text align for, set the text align to justify for DD, so definition description of text align. So I'm going to click over after my curly bracket, press enter, put another pound sign. I actually did it twice, push another pound sign, text align, and now we're dealing with a different element here, DD, curly bracket, enter, text align, justify, and semicolon. Save it, refresh, and you can see it says here, keep testing out each direction value, left, center, and back, right alignment, yada, yada, yada. All those things, so you can see how it looks. Now, refresh the document in your browser to see the result. And we'll go over here, but you'll notice it took the text that's all in this section here and it's justified it, which basically means if you've ever read a book, you notice how it's perfectly aligned on all the sides, like it fills in the space, has perfect lines on the edges of your page before you get to the margin. That's basically what it did over here. So it worked, and also I know there's no errors because up here the syntax says there's no issue. Alright, now, next thing we're going to do is you can see the text now lines up on the left and right sides of your column, and then of course, now it says here use caution justifying text. Be careful when you do it because as typography controls in CSS are not as powerful as those in desktop publishing applications, it can produce some pretty ugly spacing between words, which is really true. So you do want to be careful with that, but typically I don't think you're going to have too many issues. Now, text decoration. The text decoration property allows you to decorate text with, drum roll, lines. How exciting. I know, right? Each value, line through, none, overline, and underline, is pretty self-explanatory. So we'll simply look at the results of each value. So it says here, open text CSS in your text editor. Text editor. I never exited out, so it's still there. And I've already set up the class attributes in 0text.html document for the example. So you just need to type out the CSS rules, which we've been doing. So text decoration values right here. I already clicked here on line 19. And it says the line through value can inform visitors. We're on step 751. The line through value can inform visitors that part of the text in your blog is out of date. So I'm going to put period through text, curly bracket, enter, text, decoration, colon, line through, semicolon, save. I'm going to refresh the page. And you'll notice that here's my line through right here. So we know it worked out. Then step 752. There are many designers who remove the underline from links by assigning the value none to the anchor elements. And you can see that in figure 7.17. And we're on step 752. So let's do that right now. So remove a line from under an anchor element. We're going to type down here in 23. So period over text, under text, I was looking at the wrong element, none, A for anchor, curly bracket, enter, text, decoration, none, semicolon, save, and refresh. And it says remove the underline from a link, and now there's no underline. It looks good. Alright, removing underlines from links. Normally I avoid removing the underline from links. It's a good visual reference. However, it's something you choose to do. If it's something you choose to do, make sure visitors can visually differentiate between regular text and a link. And that's important. A lot of times you're not going to know it's a link unless you see that color change or if they hover over it. So you want to make it easy for them to tell. Alright, now I'm scrolling down here because I'm preparing for our next step. Step 7.5.3. The overline value could be useful adding lines above headers. So header 1, 2, 3, DT, etc. to help visually separate the section. So I'm going to put in period, over text, curly bracket, text, decoration, overline, semicolon, save, and then I'll refresh. And you can see here now I added an overline to the text block. I'm going to click here under my next example here so I can type it in for under the text. Now figure 7.18, a line over text could help to visually separate it from the text above it. We already know this. Now step 7.5.4. Step 7.5.4. We're moving through these quickly. Don't be afraid to pause if you need to. Make sure you are keeping up. The underline value may help with citation of book titles and when an underline is required. So I'm going to type in period, under, text, curly bracket, enter, text, decoration, underline, save. And then I'll refresh. And here's my underline right there. So it looks good. Now the text indent property indents the first line of the block text, unlike margin, which moves the entire element. So indent, I'm scrolling down here as you can see, clicking on line 39. Indent moves just the first line of text, and so I'm going to add that in. So that one's £, text, indent, dd, curly bracket, enter, text. Oh, I'm going to go back. It didn't register my enter. Text, indent, 20 pixels, and semicolon, save. And then I will refresh the page, and we can see here it indented the first lines of my text here. Now there's also text transform. You can see it's indented by 20 pixels. It does mention that. Now text transform. The text transform property allows you to capitalize text, transform uppercase text to lowercase, and change lowercase text to uppercase. It gives you a lot of options. So step 7.6.1. The capitalized value capitalizes the first letter of each word in the text blocks. And so we're going to do that. Right down here, line 44, period, text, capital, curly bracket, enter, text, I need my hyphen here. Text, hyphen, transform, colon, capitalize. If I can spell it, semicolon, and save. I'm going to click refresh over here. And then you can see it did choose the transform of it, some of it here. It did capitalize all the first letters in my text block. Now step 7.6.2. Add another rule to transform the text to all uppercase. So I'm going to click after my curly bracket in line 46 here, push enter, and then I'll push enter one more time, period, text, upper, curly bracket, enter, text, hyphen, transform, colon, uppercase, semicolon, and save. And then I refresh, and you can see to set our text in all uppercase, and now it looks like we're yelling at people. And then step 7.6.3, finally use the lowercase value to transform all uppercase and capitalize text to lowercase. So I'm going to click right here after my curly bracket in line 50, push enter twice, and type in period, text, lower referring to lowercase, curly bracket, push enter, and type in text, transform, colon, lowercase, semicolon, and save. And this is to make all text in your block all lowercase. And you can see it did exactly what we wanted it to do. Now, spacing properties. Transforming text is not all you can do with CSS. There are a few more controls for spacing between letters, words, and lines of text, and for vertical alignment. Now, line height. The line height property allows you to control the spacing between lines of text. In traditional typographic terms, this was known as leading. A common spacing between lines of text in a paragraph equals the font size, which you know is by default set to 16 pixels or normal, multiplied by the value of 1.5. If you multiply 16 by 1.5, you get the value of 24 pixels. Now we're at step 771. In 03 spacing.css, which means we need to open that up. So I'm going to click on open. Or actually, let me hang on a second. Cancel. Click here in my file. Open. And choose spacing. And I'm going to exit off text.css. And then I can also exit off one font because we haven't been touching that. I'm going to zoom in here so you can see it. Add examples below, it says. And we're going to do that here in just a minute. All right. We're going to set your paragraph, so P element, within the block quote to have a line height value of 24 pixels. And that says view the 03 spacing.html document in a browser, and you'll notice the paragraph in the block quote has more space between lines than the paragraph above it. So I'm going to take my mouse and move the arrow over to my browser preview. Get rid of the text here and change it to 03 spacing. Oh, let's try one more time here. It disappeared. So 03 hyphen spacing and then .html. Alright, good. So I'm looking at the page and I need to add examples below. Now we're talking about line height. So I'm going to click right here on 11, right under line height. I press backspace, type in block quote, P, so paragraph element, curly bracket, enter, line height, colon, 24 pixel, semicolon, save, and refresh. And you can see here it has the spacing between those. So it's referring to the line height, but I'm referring to the spacing between it. And you'll notice there's more spacing like it says there between the leading and all those. Now the browser default line height. The first paragraph has the browser's default line height setting, which is approximately 1.1875 times the default font size. So for a 16 pixel font, the line height is typically 19 pixels. Now fixed versus relative leading. What if you want to set a larger font size? Well, you would have to recalculate the line height. Ugh, that would be tedious. However, there is a simple solution. Yay, we always like simple. Change the line height value from a fixed pixel value to a relative M value. Then if you change the font size value in the body, or if your user changes his or her browser font size to be larger or smaller than 16 pixels, the line height value will be automatically be calculated. So font size, 14 pixels, multiplied by line height, 1.5 equals 21 pixels of space between the lines of text. And the font size were 18 pixels, it would equal 27 pixels of space between the lines of text. So we're going to kind of see examples of this. Step 772, change the 24 pixel fixed value to the relative value 1.5 M value for the line height. So over here, I can see here in line height in my document, block quote P, line height, and I'm going to change it from 24 pixels, get rid of this, to 1.5 M. And then I'm going to choose refresh. And it does the M instead of it. No changes occur in the spacing, but you have more flexibility in the font size if the font size ever changes. Now they have a challenge here. Challenge is change the font size for the blocking quote from 16 pixels to 18 pixels and see if the line spacing changes. So for the block quote P, it says to change it from 16 to 18 pixels. And then it removed the block quote selector, so you're selecting only paragraph element, and you should see the spacing for the text within it. Yada, yada, yada. We're going to go past that. We're not going to worry about the challenge right now. We've got other things we need to get done. We got to get done with this chapter here. Now, the website resources on font styles. There are other typographical controls that are demonstrated on the website. So letter spacing, vertical line, white space, word spacing. There's much more to learn about font spacing, sizings, and families. So I suggest you check out the website on Chapter 7, which you could, and it'll provide links to articles and demonstrations of web typography design practices. Now, you can do that on your own. We're going to keep going here with our Chapter 7. Now, the color. CSS gives you a lot of options when choosing colors for your website, and it gives you options for how to express the values of those colors, some easier to understand than others. Since we're still in the chapter dealing with the text, let's look at CSS property that targets your text color called, well, color. Now, name value challenge. Can you write out additional CSS rules for selectors, blue, green, olive, gray, with their keyword names to match figure 725? If you get stuck, view 04 color CSS in the solutions folder. Don't worry about the challenge. Alright, color property. The CSS color property is used to set the foreground color of an element's text content. So color value names. By default, browsers set the text to black, which you already see. You can use CSS to change the color of your text simply by typing one of the 147 accepted name color values like red, green, blue, etc. For these examples, you'll apply your CSS rules in 04color.css. So I need to click here in my 03 spacing, choose open, bring up 04 color. I'm going to exit out of 03 spacing here. And then I'm going to go over here and change this to, as you guessed, 04. Oh, come on. For some reason it keeps deselecting the text here. 04 hyphen color .html. And there we go, right there, perfect. Next thing we're going to do is we are going to, let's see here, in your CSS document, change your font color to the value red. So I'm going to zoom in here on the text for you so we can see it nice and big here. Add color name right here. So I'm going to add it in. Period red. So period's the ID. Curly bracket, enter color, colon, red, semicolon, save. And then I'll refresh over here. And it changes red to red for me. How exciting is that? And then color names can be easy to remember, and it shows all these different ones right here. Now make a sticky note. There is no property called font color, and to get a color behind the text, you cannot use the color property. It only works on the foreground color of an element's text. And there's lots of names. So they said there's 147 names from you can choose from. And a great resource to view the names and their color swatches is 147 colors, which they give you the link. So simply mouse over a swatch to reveal the name value. Now color value hexadecimal. The hex value starts with a hash symbol, so £, and is composed of a 6-character combination of numbers and letters ranging from 0, 9, and A through F. Each pair of characters corresponds to one of the 3 primary additive colors, red, green, and blue. You can mix different combinations to get around 16 million colors, which is really true. So for more complex colors, it's sometimes best to use an application to get the hex value, which is definitely a true thing here. So figure 727, the hslcolorpicker.com is a great online application. You can use that. And an illustration of basic hex colors for figure 7.26. And it says hex value challenge. Using the color combinations already shown, can you write additional CSS rules for the hex values of green, blue, all those. Selectors should be similar to the one you use for red. So hex period red. Hint, green selector would be hex period green. If you get stuck, view the solutions thing there. So step 782, we're going to skip past the challenge. Step 782, create a rule using the hex value for red, hashtag FF0000, to change the color. Your selector will be hashtag, the ID attribute, with a value of hex, and a descendant selector of class attribute with a value of red. So I'm going to click here under add color hex value, scroll down a little bit, And I'm going to type in hashtag hex period red curly bracket, enter, color, colon, number sign, or hashtag, I guess, and then semicolon, save. Now, since we've already done it, it's just going to stay the same there. Alright, now since each paired value repeats FF0000, you can write a single value for each pair. And it shows here in that FF00. It's because it repeats. So I could just type it in like this if I wanted, and it would still do the same thing. So that works well. Alright, now color value RGB. The RGB value uses numbers between 0, black or no color, and 255, which is light or full color. The value must start with red, green, blue, so RGB, and the numbers must be separated by commas and within parentheses. So 0, 0, 0. Now step 784, writing a CSS rule for an RGB, so 255, 0, 0 value changes your text to red. So we'll type it in. So hashtag RGB period red, and then just parentheses, curly bracket, enter, color, colon, RGB, parentheses, 255, 0, 0, and then closing parentheses, and I just move my insertion point to the right, so I push the right arrow on the keyboard, semicolon, save. And your text colors changed using the RGB value. And you can see that. Now the next thing is wrapping things up. Wow, you're on your way to becoming a web typography master. Actually, you've only scratched the surface on this topic, but now you can start to make that take your font styling knowledge beyond the browser defaults. Next, we'll delve into CSS and talk about legendary box model. Now here it has all these other options. I could add in a bunch of different colors to do change, to green and stuff like that. So for instance, if I were to go in here, I could click up here and type in those. So period green, curly bracket, enter, color, green, semicolon, save, and do it. And voila, it shows up. You don't have to type those in. If you want to, you can. Great. When I'm looking at the assignment, I'm not going to be checking for that because I want you to understand the concept, but you don't have to spend all this time on it. And as we're working on your website in the assignments, it should help you kind of get used to that anyway. So but you can add it in if you want to. So I'm doing that actually right now as I'm talking to you. Otherwise, you can just leave the challenge parts alone. It's up to you. Obviously, it's beneficial, but you don't have to do it. So make sure that you do make sure you do zip up this exercise file. You should be naming it the proper thing. If you don't remember what to name it as, then go to Plus Portals and look for the submission file that I put up there for you, so that way you can go and change it to what you need to there, and then of course submit it to me by email. So alright, and you can see I've gone and changed through these different colors. You can do that as well. Otherwise you can leave them alone. It just adds a lot there to it. So make sure you do that, and this is the end to our video on how to complete chapter number 7 in Foundations of Web Design textbook.